The rain didn't just fall, it punished the earth. Dominic Russo sat in the back of his armored town car, watching the windshield wipers fight a losing battle. He had just ordered a man to lose his fingers over a debt. He felt nothing. But then the headlights caught a figure huddled by the iron gates of his own estate, soaked, shaking. It was his new housekeeper, Clara. Dominic wasn't a savior. But the decision he made next tore his brutal empire apart. The water seeped through Clara's canvas sneakers, turning her socks into cold, squishy sponges. She didn't move. She just sat on the crumbling stone retaining wall, just outside the main gate of the Russo estate, letting the downpour flatten her hair against her skull. There was no bus coming. The transit app on her cracked phone had boldly declared the 9:40 p.m. route cancelled 30 minutes ago, right before the battery died. Her landlord had changed the locks on her apartment at noon. Her bank account held $14.12. She was 26 years old and she had literally nowhere to go. So she cried. She didn't sob theatrically. It was a silent, wretched leaking of tears that blended seamlessly with the rain, accompanied by the occasional pathetic hitch of her breath. She tucked her chin into the collar of her thin denim jacket, staring blankly at the mud swirling around the toes of her shoes. Headlights cut through the sheets of rain, blinding halogen white. Clara squinted, raising a freezing hand to shield her eyes. The low, heavy rumble of a massive engine vibrated in her chest. It was a black SUV, sleek and impenetrable, the lead car of a convoy that she recognized immediately. Dominic Russo, her employer. Or more accurately, the man whose floors she had spent the last 8 hours scrubbing. She had only seen him twice in the 3 weeks she had worked at the estate. He was a phantom in a tailored suit, surrounded by men whose jackets bulged at the ribcage. The rumor mill in the servants' kitchen was clear. Look down, don't speak, unless spoken to, and never, under any circumstances, make eye contact with the boss. The SUV didn't blast past her. It slowed the tires, crunching loudly over the wet gravel, and hissed to a stop, exactly parallel to where she sat. Clara froze. The rain drummed against the black-tinted windows. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She thought about standing up, making a run for it into the dark woods lining the road. But her legs were lead. The rear passenger window rolled down. Just halfway. The interior of the car was dark, smelling faintly of expensive leather ozone, and something darker. Copper. Blood. Dominic leaned into the sliver of light provided by the street lamp. His face was a study in hard angles, unshaven. His dark eyes fixed on her with the clinical detachment of a man inspecting a damaged piece of property. "You're the girl who cleans the East Wing," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise of the storm effortlessly. Gravelly. Flat. Clara swallowed hard. "Yes, sir." "It's 10 o'clock at night. You're sitting in the mud. I missed the bus. And your solution was to dissolve into the pavement." She flinched. The cynicism in his tone wasn't cruel. It was just a statement of fact. She was pathetic, and he saw it. "I don't have anywhere else to go," she admitted. The words tasted like ash. She didn't know why she was telling him the truth. Maybe because she was too exhausted to lie. Dominic stared at her for 5 long seconds. The silence stretched heavy and taut. He didn't look pitying. If anything, he looked mildly annoyed by the interruption to his schedule. He tapped 2 fingers against the edge of the window glass. "Get in," he said. Clara blinked rainwater running into her eyes. "What?" "I don't repeat myself, Clara." He knew her name. That sent a strange, cold shock down her spine. "Get in the car. You're ruining the aesthetic of my driveway." He rolled the window up before she could respond. The rear door clicked unlocked. Clara stood up, her knees popping. She was dripping wet, covered in grime, and she was about to step into a $100,000 armored vehicle owned by a man the news called a syndicate kingpin. But the alternative was freezing to death on the curb. She pulled the heavy door open and climbed inside. The heat in the cabin hit her like a physical blow. She sank into the leather, hyper-aware of the puddle forming beneath her. Dominic didn't look at her. He was staring straight ahead at the back of his driver's head. "Drive," he ordered. The SUV surged forward. Clara hugged her arms around her chest, her teeth beginning to chatter uncontrollably as the shock of the cold gave way to the warmth of the car. She looked over at Dominic. He was wiping a speck of dark red from his cufflink with a pristine white handkerchief. "I'm going to ruin your seats," she whispered. "They're leather." They wiped down. He tossed the soiled handkerchief into a small compartment. "Why are you homeless, Clara?" The bluntness of the question made her choke on her own breath. "Excuse me. You said you have nowhere to go. You work 40 hours a week here. The pay is above market. Why are you on the street?" He finally turned his head to look at her. His eyes were entirely devoid of warmth. They were the eyes of an accountant looking at a deficit. "My ex-boyfriend took out loans in my name. Shady ones. They garnished my bank accounts yesterday. Landlord kicked me out today." She delivered the facts in a monotone. It was easier than feeling them. Dominic held her gaze. He didn't offer a platitude. He didn't say, "I'm sorry." He just catalogued the information, nodded once, and looked away. "Pathetic," he muttered almost to himself. Clara felt a spark of anger cut through the freezing numbness in her chest. "I didn't ask for a ride, Mr. Russo. You can let me out right here." Dominic actually laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. "Quiet, Clara. You're dripping on my upholstery." The gates opened, swallowing the SUV into the sprawling grounds of the estate. When the car stopped under the massive stone portico, a man in a black trench coat immediately opened Dominic's door with an umbrella ready. Dominic stepped out into the dry shelter. He didn't look back to see if Clara was following. She scrambled out her side, shivering violently now, and jogged up the steps behind him. The massive oak doors swung open, operated by two more silent men. They stepped into the grand foyer. It was an expanse of white marble, sweeping staircases, and severe, cold lighting. Noah Dominic's underboss was waiting at the foot of the stairs. He was a broad-shouldered man, with a scar cutting through his left eyebrow. He took one look at Dominic, then shifted his gaze to the soaking, wet, shivering woman, standing 2 paces behind him. Noah's expression didn't change, but his eyes narrowed. "Dom," Noah said in greeting. "Meeting go well. Carmine won't be an issue anymore," Dominic replied, slipping out of his suit jacket. A maid stepped out of the shadows to take it. "Tell the cleaners we need a crew at the docks before morning." Clara stood completely still. Carmine won't be an issue anymore. She wasn't stupid. She knew what that meant. Her stomach turned over. She was trapped in a house of killers leaving muddy footprints on an antique Persian rug. "Understood," Noah said. He gestured subtly toward Clara. "And this is Clara. She cleans the east wing." Dominic unbuttoned the collar of his shirt, rolling his neck. He looked at Clara. "Stop shivering. It's distracting." I can't help it," she stammered through chattering teeth. Dominic sighed a harsh sound of irritation. "Mrs. Gable," he called out. The head housekeeper, a severe woman in her 60s, materialized from a hallway. She stopped dead when she saw Clara. "Mr. Russo, take her to a guest room, the one next to the library. Get her dry clothes, a hot shower, bring her food." Mrs. Gable's eyes widened fractionally. Guest rooms were for visiting capos, not maids who got caught in the rain. "Sir, she can use the staff quarters." "Did I say the staff quarters?" Dominic's voice dropped an octave. It wasn't a yell, It was a deadly quiet threat. "No, sir. Right away, sir." Mrs. Gable hurried forward, grabbing Clara by the elbow. "Come along, Clara." Clara looked at Dominic. He was already walking away, deep in a hushed conversation with Noah. He had already discarded her from his mind, a problem temporarily solved. 30 minutes later, Clara sat on the edge of a king-sized mattress that felt like a cloud. She was wearing a thick, obscenely soft grey cashmere sweater and a pair of silk pajama pants that belonged to someone much taller than her. Her wet clothes were gone, spirited away by Mrs. Gable. Her hair was damp but clean. On the nightstand sat a tray holding a bowl of thick stew, crusty bread, and a glass of red wine. She ate the stew mechanically, her mind spinning. She was waiting for the catch. Men like Dominic Russo didn't do favors. They didn't rescue stray dogs without expecting a return on their investment. Was this a prelude to something dark? Was she supposed to pay for this room with her body? The thought made her skin crawl, but she forced herself to be realistic. She was in the belly of the beast. A sharp knock at the door made her jump, nearly dropping the heavy spoon. The door opened before she could speak. Dominic stood in the doorway. He had showered. He wore a simple black t-shirt and dark slacks. Without the suit, he looked less like a boardroom executive and more like a brawler. The tattoos creeping up his forearms were visible now. He stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. He didn't lock it, but the click echoed loudly. Clara set the bowl down on the tray. She didn't stand up, but she pulled her knees to her chest defensively. Dominic walked over to the armchair by the window and sat down. He steepled his fingers, watching her. He looked exhausted. The bags under his eyes were prominent in the soft light of the bedside lamp. "You didn't drink the wine," he noted. "I don't drink when I'm terrified," Clara said. A corner of his mouth twitched. It wasn't quite a smile. "Honest, I like that. Most people lie to me, Clara. They tell me what they think I want to hear. They tell me they have my money when they don't. They tell me they aren't afraid when they're shaking." "I'm shaking," she pointed out. "I can see that." He leaned back, resting his head against the leather chair. "Who is the ex?" Clara blinked. "What?" "The ex-boyfriend. The one who took the loans. Give me a name." "Why?" "Because I asked." The flat, dangerous tone returned. "Jared. Jared Miller." She gripped the edge of the cashmere sleeves. "You don't need to do anything. I'm not asking for your help, Mr. Russo. I'm grateful for the room. I'll leave first thing in the morning. You'll leave and go where?" Dominic challenged, his eyes boring into hers. "Back to the bus stop. Back to scrubbing floors for $14 an hour while debt collectors hunt you down. It's my life. I'll figure it out. You haven't figured it out yet." He stood up abruptly. He paced to the foot of the bed, towering over her. "You are a liability, Clara. You work in my house. You have security clearance to the East Wing. If a loan shark realizes you work for me, they might try to use you. They might try to squeeze you for access." Clara's breath hitched. "I would never—" "I know," Dominic cut her off. "Because you're too terrified of me to betray me to them. But I don't leave loose ends. I don't like messes. So fire me." Dominic stopped pacing. He looked down at her, a strange, unreadable expression passing over his face. He stared at her mouth, then up to her wide, frightened eyes. "No." He turned and walked toward the door. Hand on the knob, he paused. "Sleep, Clara. Tomorrow your life changes." He walked out, shutting the door quietly. Clara sat in the silence, the warmth of the food turning to lead in her stomach. He hadn't touched her. He hadn't propositioned her. He had simply laid claim to her existence. Morning broke over the estate in a wash of pale, watery sunlight. Clara woke up tangled in a 1,000-thread count duvet, disoriented. It took 3 seconds for the previous night to crash down on her. She threw off the covers. Her old clothes, washed, dried, and neatly folded, were sitting on the armchair. She dressed quickly, abandoning the soft cashmere. She tied her hair back into a severe bun. It was 7 a.m. Her shift started at 7:30. When she walked into the massive servants' kitchen, the chatter died instantly. 4 maids, a sous chef, and a groundskeeper all turned to stare at her. Mrs. Gable was standing by the industrial coffee machine. She looked at Clara, then at the clock. "You're not on the schedule today, Clara," Mrs. Gable said, her voice tight. "I work Tuesdays," Clara replied, keeping her chin up despite the burning stares of her co-workers. She knew what they were thinking. Maid spends the night in the boss's wing. It wasn't hard to do the math, even if their math was wrong. Mr. Russo left specific instructions. Mrs. Gable continued, her tone clipped. "You are to join him in his study." Someone dropped a whisk. It clattered loudly against the tile floor. Clara felt a flush of heat rise to her cheeks. She ignored the whispers that started the second she turned her back. She walked out of the kitchen, navigating the labyrinthine hallways toward the West Wing, Dominic's private domain. 2 heavily armed guards stood outside double oak doors. They didn't stop her. One of them simply reached out and opened the door, gesturing for her to enter. The study was cavernous. Bookshelves lined the walls filled with heavy leather-bound volumes. A massive mahogany desk sat in the center of the room. Behind it, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the sprawling manicured back lawns. Dominic was sitting at the desk. He was wearing a dark grey suit, a Bluetooth earpiece in his right ear. He was signing a stack of documents with rapid, sharp strokes of a fountain pen. He didn't look up when she walked in. "Sit," he commanded, pointing the end of his pen toward a leather chair opposite him. Clara sat. She kept her back straight, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "No, tell the Greeks the price is non-negotiable," Dominic said into the earpiece. "If they don't like it, they can try moving their shipments through the Canadian border and deal with the feds. I don't care. Handle it." He tapped the earpiece, severing the call. He finally looked up. He laid the pen down and steepled his fingers, resting his elbows on the desk. "Jared Miller," Dominic said. Clara's heart stopped. 28 years old. Unemployed. He owes $60,000 to a low-level bookie operating out of a strip club in Queens. He used your social security number to secure a secondary loan of $20,000 to try and pay off the first one. He lost that too. Dominic recited the facts like he was reading a weather report. "How did you—" "I told you I don't like messes," Dominic interrupted. He opened a drawer and pulled out a thick manila folder, tossing it onto the desk between them. "The bookie has been bought out. Jared Miller's debt is now owned by me. The secondary loan in your name has been erased." Clara stared at the folder. Her ears were ringing. "Erased? You paid $20,000. "I didn't pay anything," Dominic said darkly. "I had a conversation with the lender. He saw the error of his ways." Clara felt sick. She gripped the arms of the chair. "What did you do to Jared?" "Nothing yet." Dominic leaned forward. The air in the room suddenly felt incredibly thin. "He is currently sitting in a warehouse near the docks, waiting to find out if he gets to keep his kneecaps. That decision is entirely up to you." "Up to me?" Clara gasped, half standing out of the chair. "Are you insane? Let him go. I don't care about him. I just want him away from me. Sit down." It was a command that brooked no argument. Clara slowly sank back into the leather. "He stole from you. He left you on the street," Dominic said, genuinely puzzled by her reaction. "Men die for less every day." "I am not a killer," Clara shot back, her voice shaking with rage and fear. "I don't want his blood on my hands. Let him go. Dominic watched her, a slow, predatory calculation in his eyes. He picked up his pen and twirled it between his fingers. Fine. He walks. But he leaves the state. If he ever comes within 100 miles of you again, I won't ask for your permission next time. Clara let out a shaky breath, closing her eyes. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Dominic dropped the pen. It hit the desk with a sharp clack. You owe me, Clara. Her eyes snapped open. Here it was. The catch. I don't have $20,000. I don't want your money. Dominic stood up. He walked around the massive desk, leaning back against the edge of it, crossing his arms over his chest. He was too close now. She could smell his cologne sandalwood and something sharp like gunpowder. Then what do you want? She asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. I am surrounded by people who want my money, my power or my head, Dominic said, staring down at her. I have guards, I have soldiers, I have accountants. I don't have anyone who tells me the truth. Clara frowned, confused. I'm a maid. Not anymore. Dominic reached out. He didn't touch her skin. He hooked a single finger under the collar of her cheap cotton uniform shirt, pulling lightly. You're done scrubbing floors. You are moving into the East Wing permanently. You are going to be my personal assistant. I don't know how to be an assistant. You know how to observe. You know how to stay quiet. And you have a survival instinct. Dominic dropped his hand, stepping back. Your salary is quadrupled. You will have a driver. You will be by my side during meetings. You will manage my schedule. And you will tell me exactly what you see when I'm dealing with these snakes. Clara stared at him, incredulous. You want a spy? I want someone who isn't afraid to tell me I'm surrounded by idiots, Dominic corrected. You weren't afraid to tell me I was ruining your life last night. I need that. And if I say no, Dominic's expression went dead. I bought your debt, Clara. I own Jared Miller's life. You're in my world now. Saying no isn't an option. He wasn't asking. He had built a gilded cage overnight, and she had walked right into it. Clara looked at the manila folder, then up at the cold, beautiful, dangerous man who had just rewritten her entire existence. When do I start? She asked. A genuine smile, sharp and triumphant, finally broke across Dominic's face. Right now. We have a meeting with the Russian syndicate in an hour. Go change. Wear something black. Mrs. Gable produced a black crepe sheath dress from somewhere in the estate's cavernous depths. It fit Clara perfectly, which was somehow more terrifying than if it hadn't. It meant they had her measurements. It meant she was a known variable in an equation she didn't understand. 30 minutes later, Clara sat in the back of the SUV next to Dominic. The partition was up. The silence between them was thick humming, with the vibration of the tires on the asphalt. Dominic was reading emails on a tablet, completely ignoring her. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, Clara said. The words broke the quiet like a dropped glass. Dominic didn't look up from the screen. You sit. You listen. You don't speak unless I ask you a direct question. And if they ask me who I am, they won't. You're furniture to them. He finally swiped the tablet off and turned to her. These men are predators, Clara. They only look at threats and prey. You are neither. You are a shadow. Use it. The meeting took place in the back room of a high-end meatpacking district steakhouse. The air smelled of charred bone-in ribeyes, cigar smoke, and expensive scotch. 4 men sat on one side of a long mahogany table. Russians. The man in the center, Volkov, looked like a shaved bear crammed into a Brioni suit. Dominic sat opposite him. Clara was directed to a small chair set back against the wall entirely out of the primary line of sight. Noah stood by the door, arms crossed, eyes dead. Volkov spoke in heavy, rolling English. He was angry. He slammed a heavy fist on the table, arguing about shipping routes, customs payoffs, and percentages. Dominic just listened. He didn't raise his voice. He sipped his water, letting Volkov exhaust his own aggressive energy. Clara watched. She felt entirely out of place, her heart hammering against her ribs. But as the minutes ticked by, her panic began to recede, replaced by a hyper-focused clarity. Dominic had told her to observe. So she did. She looked past Volkov. She watched the man sitting to Volkov's immediate left, a younger man, maybe 30, with slicked-back blonde hair. While Volkov yelled and postured, the younger man was perfectly still. Too still. But under the table, hidden from everyone except Clara's angled vantage point, his foot was tapping a frantic, irregular rhythm against the hardwood floor. More importantly, every time Volkov mentioned a specific warehouse down by the naval yards, the younger man's hand drifted unconsciously to his jacket pocket, the shape of a burner phone pressed against the fabric. He was waiting for something. 20% is an insult, Russo, Volkov growled, leaning across the table. We bleed for those docks. We take 25 or we shut the whole line down. Dominic set his glass down. He looked at Volkov, then let his eyes drift casually to the corner of the room. He met Clara's gaze. He raised one dark eyebrow, a silent, imperceptible question. Clara swallowed hard. She didn't speak. She just shifted her eyes to the younger blonde man, then looked pointedly at the man's jacket pocket. She tapped her own finger against her thigh, mimicking the nervous foot tapping. Dominic's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes clicked into place. He looked back at Volkov. You don't control the line anymore. Grigori, Dominic said softly. Your lieutenant does. The room went dead silent. Volkov frowned, confused. What are you talking about? Dominic didn't answer Volkov. He looked directly at the blonde man. Who are you selling the customs schedules to, the Feds or the Albanians? The younger man's face drained of blood. His hand shot toward his jacket, but not for the phone. For a weapon. He never made it. Noah moved with terrifying, fluid speed. In 2 steps, Noah was behind the blonde man, a suppressed pistol pressed hard into the base of his skull. The click of the hammer, pulling back, sounded like a cannon shot in the quiet room. Volkov froze, looking between Dominic Noah and his own lieutenant. The realization dawned on his face, twisting his features into pure, ugly rage. Take him! Volkov spat, waving a hand in disgust at his own man. He looked back at Dominic, the bravado completely gone. 20% is acceptable. 15, Dominic countered. For the inconvenience. Volkov gritted his teeth. Done. 10 minutes later, Clara was back in the SUV. She was trembling so hard her teeth clicked. The adrenaline was leaving her system, leaving behind a cold, hollow terror. She had just signed a man's death warrant with a glance. Dominic poured 2 fingers of amber liquid from a crystal decanter built into the console. He held the glass out to her. Drink, he ordered. Clara took the glass with shaking hands and swallowed. The liquor burned a fiery trail down her throat, forcing a cough, but it stopped the shivering. He was leaking the schedules, Dominic said, looking out the window at the passing city lights. If they had shut the line down, the Feds would have raided the warehouse tomorrow. I would have lost $6 million and 3 men. He turned to look at her. The clinical detachment was gone, replaced by a sharp, assessing intensity. You saw the phone. He was tapping his foot, Clara whispered, staring at the empty glass. Every time Volkov mentioned the naval yards, he reached for his pocket. He was nervous. He was waiting for a text. Dominic stared at her for a long time. The silence wasn't oppressive this time. It was the sound of a man recalibrating his entire worldview. $14 an hour, he muttered softly. You were cleaning floors for $14 an hour. He reached over and took the empty glass from her rigid hands. You earn your keep, Clara. 6 weeks blurred into a monotonous high-stakes routine. Clara's world shrank to the size of the Russo estate and the tinted back seat of the armored SUV. She no longer wore cheap cotton. Her closet in the East Wing was filled with tailored slacks, silk blouses, and cashmere. She had a company credit card with no limit, a private driver, and a security detail that shadowed her if she so much as walked to the gardens. She was drowning in luxury, and she was suffocating. Her days were spent managing Dominic's life. Not the blood and the violence, Noah handled that. Clara handled the money. The clean money. Real estate acquisitions, legitimate shell companies, charity galas designed to launder Dominic's public image. She organized his ledgers with a ruthless efficiency that bordered on obsession. It was the only way she could maintain control. If she focused on the math, she didn't have to think about the men who disappeared after Dominic made a phone call. It was 2 a.m. on a Thursday. The estate was dead quiet. Clara was sitting on the floor of Dominic's study, surrounded by stacks of tax documents from a concrete supplier in New Jersey. Her hair was piled in a messy knot, and she was wearing a pair of oversized sweatpants and a tank top, having abandoned her professional armor hours ago. The heavy oak doors clicked open. Clara didn't jump. She was used to his ghost-like movements now. Dominic walked in, shrugging off a tailored jacket that smelled faintly of cigar smoke and rain. He looked exhausted. The brutal, hard lines of his face were drawn tight. He stopped when he saw her on the floor. He leaned against the edge of the massive desk, crossing his ankles. You're bleeding on my paperwork. He noted his voice gravelly from fatigue. Clara frowned, looking down. A paper cut on her index finger was smeared across a ledger margin. She sighed, popping the finger into her mouth. It's a casualty of war. The New Jersey numbers are a mess. They're skimming off the top. I know. Clara looked up at him. You know then why am I auditing them at 2 a.m? To see if you'd catch it, Dominic said simply. Clara dropped her pen. You are testing me still. I test everyone, Clara. It's how I stay alive. He pushed off the desk and walked over to the wet bar in the corner. He poured a glass of water, not scotch. He walked over and handed it down to her. Clara took it, her fingers brushing his. His skin was warm. The brief contact sent an involuntary jolt up her arm. She hated that her body reacted to him. She hated that despite the fear, despite the cage he had built around her, she found herself constantly analyzing the geometry of his jawline when he wasn't looking. You don't sleep, Dominic said. It wasn't a question. Neither do you. I have a syndicate to run. You have a spreadsheet. Go to bed, Clara. I can't. She pulled her knees to her chest, resting her chin on them. If I close my eyes, I think about Jared. I think about Volkov's lieutenant. I think about the fact that I am balancing the books for a man who ordered a hit before breakfast. Dominic's eyes hardened. The brief moment of domestic quiet vanished. He crouched down so he was at eye level with her. Do you want to leave? He asked. The tone was flat dangerous. Clara looked into his dark eyes. It was a trap. She knew it, but the exhaustion made her reckless. Would you let me? No. The answer was immediate, absolute. Then why ask? Because I want to know if you still hate me. Clara blinked, caught off guard by the raw honesty of the statement. He didn't sound angry. He sounded entirely factual, like he was trying to solve a complex equation. I don't hate you, she admitted softly. I hate this world. I hate that I'm good at this. But I don't hate you. Dominic reached out. For a second, she thought he was going to strike her. Instead, his rough thumb brushed against her cheekbone, wiping away a smudge of ink she hadn't realized was there. His touch was shockingly gentle. "You are the only quiet thing in my life," he said, his voice dropping to a rough whisper. "Don't lose your mind on my account, Clara. The blood is mine. You just count the pennies." He stood up abruptly, turning his back on her, the walls slamming back into place. "Go to sleep. We have the hospital benefit tomorrow night. You'll need to smile for the cameras." He walked out of the room. Clara sat on the floor, the glass of water trembling in her hand. The paper cut throbbed. She realized with a sinking horror that she wasn't just surviving in his world anymore. She was starting to tether herself to him. The St. Jude's Charity Gala was a masterclass in hypocrisy. 300 of the city's wealthiest elites packed into a gilded ballroom, sipping champagne and bidding on modern art to cure childhood diseases, completely ignoring the fact that half the men in the room made their fortunes through extortion. Clara stood by a massive marble pillar, nursing a club soda. She wore a floor-length emerald green gown that Dominic had selected personally. It clung to her ribs and flared at the hips, an agonizingly beautiful piece of armor. Dominic was 30 feet away, cornered by a state senator and a real estate developer. He hadn't looked at her in an hour, but she knew exactly where he was. It was a sixth sense she had developed, an invisible string pulled tight between them in crowded rooms. "You look bored." Clara stiffened. The voice came from her left, smooth, oily, and dripping with false charm. She turned to see Dante Moretti. He was the younger brother of Carmine, the man Dominic had handled the night Clara sat crying in the rain. Dante was handsome in a sharp, reptilian way. He wore a white tuxedo jacket and a smile that didn't reach his cold, dead eyes. "Mr. Moretti," Clara said smoothly, channeling every ounce of Dominic's icy detachment. "I was just admiring the centerpieces." "Cut the crap, sweetheart." Dante stepped closer, invading her personal space. He smelled of peppermint and stale alcohol. "We both know you aren't here for the flowers. You're Russo's new pet, the accountant." Clara took a deliberate step back. "I'm his executive assistant." Dante laughed. It was an ugly sound. "Sure you are. I heard about you. Nobody knew where you came from. One day you're scrubbing toilets, the next you're holding the keys to the kingdom. Rumor is you have his ear." "I manage his schedule," Clara said, her voice steady, though her pulse was hammering in her throat. She scanned the crowd. Noah was on the opposite side of the room. Dominic was still talking to the senator. She was isolated. "I need a meeting with him." Dante dropped the smile. His voice turned hard, desperate. "He's freezing my family out of the garment district. I'm bleeding cash and he won't take my calls." "Then you should contact his office during business hours." Clara turned to walk away. Dante's hand shot out, wrapping like a vice around her bare upper arm. His grip was bruising, pulling her sharply back against the pillar, out of sight of the main floor. "Listen to me, you little bitch!" Dante hissed, his face inches from hers. "You're going to put me on his schedule, tomorrow, or I'll find out exactly where you go when you leave that fortress. I know about the ex-boyfriend. I know about the debts. You aren't untouchable." Clara's breath hitched. Fear, cold and sharp, spiked in her chest. She opened her mouth to scream for security. She didn't have to. A hand, large and encased in a black suit sleeve, clamped onto the back of Dante's neck. Dante didn't even have time to gasp. The force of the grip yanked him backward so violently his feet left the carpet. He hit the floor with a sickening thud, choking as the air was forced from his lungs. Dominic stood over him. The state senator was gone. The calm, composed businessman was gone. The man standing over Dante was the monster Clara had only heard whispers about. Dominic's face was a mask of absolute unholy rage. He stepped heavily onto Dante's chest with one polished dress shoe pinning the man to the floor. The sound of ribs groaning under the pressure made Clara nauseous. "Take your hand," Dominic said softly, the quiet tone carrying more menace than a scream. "Off my property." Dante was wheezing his hands, clawing uselessly at Dominic's leg. "Dom Russo, wait." Noah was suddenly there, materializing from the crowd like a ghost. He stepped between the scene and the nearest guests, his broad back blocking the view, his hands casually resting near his waistband. Dominic didn't look at Noah. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked at Dante. He pressed his heel down harder. Dante let out a pathetic, high-pitched squeak. "If you ever look at her again," Dominic said, "I won't just take the garment district. I will take your skin." "Do you understand me?" Dante managed a frantic, choking nod. Dominic stepped off him. He didn't offer a hand. He didn't spare the gasping man another glance. He turned to Clara. His eyes swept over her, landing instantly on the red rising marks on her pale arm where Dante had grabbed her. Something feral flashed in his dark eyes. Without a word, Dominic reached out and wrapped his hand gently around her uninjured wrist. His grip was warm, completely contrasting the cold violence of the moment prior. "We're leaving," he said. He pulled her through a side exit, past a startled waiter, and out into the humid night air. The valet scrambled to bring the armored SUV around. Dominic didn't let go of her wrist until they were inside the car and the doors locked with a heavy, final thunk. The engine roared to life. The partition was already up. Clara sat trembling, staring at the red marks on her arm. The adrenaline crash was making her dizzy. She had survived, but the reality of her situation was suffocating. She wasn't just an employee. To men like Dante, she was a weakness to be exploited. "Let me see it," Dominic demanded. Clara flinched, pulling her arm back. "I'm fine. He just surprised me." I said, "Let me see it." It wasn't a request. Clara slowly extended her arm toward him in the dim light of the cabin. Dominic took her forearm gently in both hands. He examined the bruises forming on her pale skin. His jaw was clenched so tight, a muscle ticked rapidly near his ear. He ran the pad of his thumb lightly over the red marks. The touch sent a violent shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with fear. "I should have killed him," Dominic murmured, his voice thick with a dark, terrifying possessiveness. "You can't kill everyone who talks to me." Clara breathed, her voice shaking. Dominic looked up from her arm, meeting her eyes. The space between them in the back of the car suddenly felt impossibly small. All the oxygen evaporated. "I can," Dominic said softly. "And I will." He didn't pull away. His hand slid from her forearm up to her shoulders, pulling her slightly forward. Clara didn't resist. The gravitational pull of him was too strong. For weeks she had lived in terror of the monster. Now, sitting in the dark, she realized the most dangerous thing wasn't his violence. It was the terrifying realization that he was aiming it all at the rest of the world just to keep her safe. "You're shaking again," he whispered, his face inches from hers, his breath ghosting over her lips. "I'm not cold this time," she admitted, her voice barely a thread of sound. Dominic closed his eyes for a fraction of a second, a man losing a war with himself. Then he opened them, the dark irises completely blown out, and he crushed his mouth against hers. He didn't kiss her like a savior. He kissed her like a starving man who had just found water in a barren wasteland. It was a collision of teeth and heat, desperate and bruising. Dominic's hands slid from her shoulders up into her hair, his fingers twisting into the elaborate updo Mrs. Gable had spent an hour pinning into place, tearing the pins out to grip the thick strands at the nape of her neck. He pulled her against his chest, crushing the emerald silk of her gown. Clara gasped against his mouth, her hands flying up to grip the lapels of his tuxedo jacket. She expected to feel trapped. She expected the suffocating panic that had defined the last 6 weeks of her life. Instead, she felt an electric, terrifying clarity. She kissed him back. It wasn't a surrender. It was an answering strike. She tasted expensive scotch, the metallic tang of adrenaline, and the underlying sharp scent of violence that clung to him like a second skin. A heavy, jagged groan vibrated in Dominic's chest. He angled her face, deepening the kiss, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw with a rough, proprietary possessiveness. The armored SUV hit a pothole, throwing them closer together in the dark cabin. The world outside the tinted glass ceased to exist. Suddenly Clara pushed. She didn't shove him away, but she planted her palms flat against his chest, breaking the contact. She was breathing hard, her chest heaving, her lips swollen and stinging. Dominic froze. His hands remained tangled in her hair, his face inches from hers. His eyes were completely black in the shadows, chaotic and entirely stripped of the icy control he wore like armor. He looked dangerous. He looked unhinged. "I am not a pet," Clara whispered. Her voice shook, but the words were made of iron. "I am not a maid you elevated, and I am not a prize you get to keep in a glass box." Dominic stared at her. His jaw tightened. He didn't move. Dante was right about one thing. She continued, her fingers digging into his lapels. "I am a weakness. If I am just your assistant, I am collateral damage. If I am, whatever this is, I am a target. I won't sit in the dark and wait for one of your enemies to use me to get to you. Nobody will ever touch you." Dominic snarled, the sound low and feral. "You can't guarantee that. You can't control the whole world, Dominic." It was the first time she had used his first name. The sound of it on her lips hit him like a physical blow. The feral energy drained out of him, leaving behind a stark, exhausted exhaustion. He slowly untangled his hands from her hair. He sat back against the leather seat, running a hand over his face. "You're right," he said. The admission cost him. Men like Dominic Russo never admitted powerlessness. "I built an empire on leverage, on knowing exactly what men value and holding a knife to it. Now I have given them a knife to hold to my own throat." He turned to look at her. The streetlight sweeping past illuminated the harsh, beautiful angles of his face. "I should let you go. I should give you a new identity, a passport, and $10 million and put you on a plane to Switzerland." Clara swallowed the lump of panic in her throat. "Is that what you want? It's what would keep you breathing. I asked what you want." Dominic held her gaze. The silence stretched tight, humming with the vibration of the tires. "I want you in my house," he said, his voice dropping to a gravelly murmur. "I want you auditing my ledgers. I want you sitting across from me at 2 a.m, telling me I'm a fool. I want you." "Then let me in," Clara said. Dominic frowned slightly. "You are in." "No. I balance the clean money. I stand in the shadows. If I am going to share the risk, I want to know exactly what the risk is." Clara sat up straighter, smoothing the ruined fabric of her dress. No more half-truths. No more hiding the blood behind shell companies. "I want the real books, Dominic. All of them." He looked at her as if she had just asked him for a loaded gun. "Clara, if you see those books, there is no plausible deniability. If the feds raid the estate, you go down with me. You become a co-conspirator. You become syndicate." "I am already syndicate to men like Dante Moretti," she pointed out coldly. "I'd rather face the federal government knowing exactly what I'm defending than die blind in an alley because I didn't know the stakes." Dominic studied her for a long, agonizing minute. He was calculating, measuring her spine. measuring her resolve. He had pulled a stray dog out of the rain, and she had evolved into a wolf. A slow, dark smile curved his lips. It was the most genuine expression she had ever seen on his face. "First thing tomorrow morning," he said. "We open the black ledger." 2 weeks later, the humidity broke. A bitter autumn chill took its place. Clara stood inside the cavernous expanse of an abandoned meatpacking warehouse in Brooklyn. The air smelled of rust-stagnant river water and decay. She wore a heavy camel coat over a charcoal-tailored suit, a clipboard gripped tightly in her gloved hands. Dominic had kept his word. He gave her the real books, the black ledgers. She hadn't blinked. Instead, she had taken the blood-soaked numbers and ruthlessly organized them, finding 3 major cash leaks in the first week. Today, she was securing a physical asset, a new distribution hub. Noah stood 5 feet to her right. Paulie and Sal covered the rusted rolling doors at the entrance. Dominic was across town meeting a union boss. "Structural integrity is shot," Clara noted. She pointed her pen at the sagging ceiling beams. "We need 200 grand just to pass a bribe-friendly inspection. Drop the offer by 15%. Noah nodded, his eyes continuously scanning the gloom. "I'll make the call." Clara pivoted to check the rear office space. Her heel caught on a jagged, uneven piece of concrete. She stumbled, her line of sight dropping toward the floor to catch her balance. That slip saved her life. From the lowered angle, she caught the shape of a man stepping out of the dark office corridor. He wasn't one of theirs. He raised a long, metallic pipe to his shoulder. No, a rifle. "Noah!" Clara screamed. She threw herself sideways behind a massive, rusted industrial freezer unit. A deafening crack ripped through the warehouse. The concrete where she had just been standing exploded into a cloud of pulverized dust. Chaos detonated. Noah fired 3 suppression shots into the dark corridor, diving for the cover of a thick concrete pillar. Paulie and Sal returned fire toward the back, just as a black SUV rammed the rusted loading doors, tearing them completely off their tracks. 6 men in tactical gear poured out of the vehicle. "Ambush, we need extraction!" Noah roared into his shoulder radio. Clara pressed her spine against the freezing metal of the freezer. Her ears rang with a high-pitched whine. Bullets chewed through the air, sparking violently as they ricocheted off steel beams. The freezer was thick, but it wouldn't hold against sustained rifle fire. She dropped to her hands and knees. Shards of broken glass sliced through her stockings, digging into her skin. She ignored the sting. She crawled frantically toward a stack of thick wooden shipping crates 10 feet away. Pop, pop, pop. Sal collapsed, a red mist painting the cinder-block wall behind him. Clara clamped a hand over her mouth, scrambling faster. She slid behind the heavy crates just as a spray of automatic fire splintered the wood inches above her skull. "Flush her out," the voice echoed over the gunfire. Oily, arrogant, familiar. Dante Moretti. He hadn't been scared away at the gala. He had simply waited for Dominic to let her out of his sight. "Noah, it's Dante, left flank," she screamed, her throat tearing with the effort. Noah shifted his fire, pinning the left side of the room. Clara pressed her forehead against her bleeding knees. She was unarmed. She looked at the floor. 3 feet away lay a heavy iron crowbar in a pile of discarded tools. She lunged, grabbing the cold iron with both hands, and dragged it back into cover. The gunfire abruptly stopped. The silence was thick, heavy, and pregnant with violence. "Clara," Dante called out. Boots crunched on glass. Closer. "Russo isn't here to step on my neck today. Walk out and my men make it quick. Make me come back there, and I promise I'll make it last ours." Clara gripped the crowbar. Her knuckles turned white. She watched a shadow stretch across the concrete floor, creeping toward the edge of her crates. 2 steps. 1. A masked man stepped around the corner, his rifle raised to eye level. He didn't look down. Clara swung, She drove the iron bar directly into the side of his knee with every ounce of terror and rage she possessed. The bone shattered with a sickening wet snap. The man shrieked, collapsing in a heap. Clara dropped the bar, grabbed the strap of his dropped rifle, and dragged it back into the shadows. "You bitch!" Dante screamed. Before he could issue another order, a heavy engine roared. A massive, unmarked armored truck smashed through the cinder-block wall of the loading dock at 60 miles an hour, showering the room in debris. Dominic. The rear doors flew open. Enforcers poured out, moving with mechanical precision. But Dominic was a force of absolute destruction. He wore no jacket. He held a matte black handgun in each fist. He didn't take cover. He walked straight into the gunfire. A man popped up from behind a pillar to shoot. Dominic raised his right hand, fired twice without breaking stride, and the man dropped like a stone. 60 seconds later, the warehouse was dead quiet. Clara. It was a ragged, desperate rasp. Dominic dropped his guns. They clattered on the concrete. He crossed the room in 3 massive strides. He grabbed the lapels of her coat and yanked her against his chest, burying his face in her neck. He was shaking. The kingpin, the monster, was trembling. "I'm here," she whispered, wrapping her arms tightly around him. "Dom," Noah's voice shattered the moment. He stood near the ruined office, dragging a battered, bloody figure by a tactical vest. He threw Dante onto the floor at Dominic's feet. Dante was missing teeth. He coughed up blood, staring up at the monster he had summoned. Dominic looked down. He reached to his ankle and pulled a heavy serrated hunting knife. "Dominic," Clara said quietly. He paused, bloodlust radiating from him. "He tried to take you. I know." Clara stepped forward, ignoring her bleeding knees. She looked down at Dante. She felt absolutely nothing. "But you can't kill him." Dante let out a pathetic, wet sob of relief. Dominic frowned. "Don't ask for mercy. I'm asking for strategy," Clara said flatly. She laid her hand gently over Dominic's fist, holding the knife. "Kill him now and Carmine's loyalists retaliate. We lose 20 million and the Port Authority. We take him alive. We lock him in the basement. I bleed his bank accounts dry. I force him to sign over the garment district. We dismantle his empire legally." She looked down at Dante, whose relief vanished into sheer horror. "And when he is broken and entirely useless, you put a bullet in his head." The warehouse fell dead silent. Noah stared at Clara, a profound respect settling on his scarred face. Dominic looked from Dante to the woman standing beside him. He saw her cold intellect, her absolute ruthlessness. Slowly he slid the knife back into its sheath. "Bag him," Dominic ordered Noah. He wrapped a heavy arm around Clara's shoulders, pulling her close, and walked her out into the cold. The fireplace in the master suite of the West Wing crackled softly, casting long dancing shadows against the dark mahogany walls. It was 3 a.m. The estate was locked down. Outside, a storm was brewing, rain beginning to lash against the reinforced glass windows. It was a poetic symmetry that wasn't lost on Clara. She sat on the edge of the massive, king-sized bed. She was wearing one of Dominic's heavy black t-shirts, having scrubbed the dust blood and terror of the warehouse off her skin in a scalding hour-long shower. Dominic was sitting in a leather armchair by the fire. He was shirtless, his dark hair damp, the intricate sprawling tattoos across his chest and arms fully visible in the firelight. He held a tumbler of amber liquid, but he wasn't drinking. He was just watching her. Dante signed the first wave of transfers, Dominic said quietly, breaking the heavy silence. His offshore accounts in the Caymans are empty. The money is currently being washed through 3 dummy corporations you set up last week. Good, Clara said. She pulled her knees to her chest. By tomorrow night he won't even own the shoes on his feet. Dominic set the glass down on a side table. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped together. The brutal kingpin was gone, leaving behind a man who looked like he had barely survived a shipwreck. "I almost lost you today," he said. The words were heavy, dragged out of his chest against his will. "But you didn't. I couldn't protect you. I put you in a cage, I gave you an army, and a two-bit street thug still got within 20 feet of you with a rifle." Dominic rubbed his jaw roughly. "My world is poison, Clara. It infects everything it touches." Clara stood up from the bed. She walked across the thick Persian rug, her bare feet silent. She stopped in front of his chair. "You didn't infect me," she said softly. She reached down, taking his large, calloused hands in hers. She pulled gently. Dominic yielded to her, completely standing up so he towered over her. "I was dying in the rain when you found me, Dominic," she said, looking up into his dark, tortured eyes. "I was a victim. I let people walk all over me, steal from me, throw me away. You didn't poison me. You gave me teeth." She reached up, resting her palms flat against his warm, bare chest, right over the heavy, steady beating of his heart. "I don't want a normal life." She confessed the truth, ringing clear and absolute in the quiet room. "I don't want peace if it means being weak. I want this. I want the power. I want the empire, and I want you." Dominic let out a shuddering breath. His hands came up to grip her waist, pulling her flush against his body. "You are making a deal with the devil, little accountant. The devil is just a man who knows how to keep his books balanced." Clara smiled faintly, her hands sliding up to wrap around the back of his neck. Dominic didn't smile. The intensity in his gaze was blinding, consuming. He leaned down, resting his forehead against hers. "I will burn the city down before I let anyone touch you again." He vowed, his voice a rough, unbreakable promise. "I will drown the streets in blood. You are my anchor, Clara. You are my empire." "Then let's go build it," she whispered. He didn't answer with words. He kissed her. It wasn't the desperate, violent collision in the car. It was deep, possessive, and infinitely consuming. He picked her up effortlessly, her legs wrapping around his waist, and carried her toward the bed as the storm raged impotently against the glass outside. He had found a crying maid in the rain. He was going to crown a queen. The next morning, the sun broke through the clouds, casting a brilliant, blinding light over the Russo estate. Clara sat behind the massive mahogany desk in Dominic's study. She was wearing a sharp, black tailored suit, her hair pulled back into a severe, perfect knot. In front of her sat the black ledger. The double oak doors clicked open. Noah walked in. He looked at Clara sitting in the boss's chair. He didn't flinch. He didn't question it. He walked forward and placed a thick manila folder on the edge of the desk. "The deed to the garment district warehouses, Miss Clara," Noah said respectfully. "Dante signed them over at 6 a.m. "Excellent work, Noah," Clara said smoothly, opening the folder to verify the signatures. "Transfer the deeds to the secondary holding company in Delaware, and tell Paulie to prepare the Atlantic City site." "Understood." Noah hesitated for a fraction of a second. "And Dante?" Clara looked up. Her eyes were calm, calculating, and entirely devoid of mercy. "Tell Dominic to handle it," she said. "The ledger is closed." Noah bowed his head slightly. "Yes, ma'am." He turned and walked out of the room, shutting the heavy oak doors behind him. Clara picked up her fountain pen, turned to a fresh page in the black ledger, and began to write. The ink flowed perfectly. There were no loose ends. There were no messes. Just a new order. Clara didn't just survive the storm. She became it. What started as a desperate night in the rain forged a partnership that brought the city's underworld to its knees. Dominic Russo wanted a quiet observer, but he gained a ruthless queen who knew exactly how to balance his blood-soaked ledgers. If you loved watching Clara's dark evolution and this gritty high-stakes mafia romance, do me a favor, hit that like button. Subscribe and click the bell so you never miss another dark, suspenseful story. Share this video with someone who loves a truly dangerous power couple. See you next time.